Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Freeze, and today I'm going to be sharing what I would do if I was an AHL GM or a coach in terms of trying to build a roster. So, as you can see on the screen here, I break it down, and how I'll say it is I do for the forwards, I do 1-3-2-1. You'll see this. I'll explain it a little bit in greater detail here. But again, 1-3-2-1. For the defense, I go 1-2-1. And for my goaltenders, I do 2. So what I mean by those numbers is those numbers apply to prospects that have been drafted by the LA Kings that are currently in their system. So you're trying to get these guys playing time in a professional setting close to home so you can go watch their games. You can be familiar with them. They're in the same practice facility as you. The coaching staff talks to your coach, to the Kings coaching staff, as well as the Kings upper management. It's a little bit more in tight and close to home. And the idea is that you want these prospects to keep maturing and growing, but you don't want them doing it overseas, or you don't want them doing it at college, halfway across the country, or you don't want them, whatever, staying in juniors for too long up in Canada, and you have to send one of your amateur scouts to go scout them, something like that. You really want these guys as close to you as possible, and you want to give these guys chances to play meaningful games. But at the same time, you also have to build a team that is the Ontario Reign. You can't have all these prospects make up that team. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but as actually, this is a perfect example. But I went to the Empire Classic preseason game between the Kings and the Ducks out in Ontario, and you'll see this a lot at most AHL games, but I saw it very specifically when I was there. But there was this lady, and she was wearing a TJ Tynan Ontario Reign jersey. She wasn't wearing an Akil Thomas jersey or an Alex Turcotte jersey or somebody that's going to end up with the LA Kings. She was wearing a TJ Tynan jersey because he's an Ontario Reign guy. Do you know what I'm saying by that? I'm not trying to bag on TJ Tynan. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is that there's some guys that are Ontario Reign players that the fans who are fans of the Ontario Reign will buy their stuff, or they will identify those guys as being Ontario Reign staples. And so the reason why I'm doing 1-3-2-1 is because you got to give these guys, the prospects, some playing time, yes, but you also have to build a team that attracts Ontario Reign fans. It's not just Kings fans that want to go watch the prospects. You got to make a team that is the Ontario Reign. So on the first line, I'm putting the one in the middle at center because that would be ideal. You want to have as many centermen in your system with your prospects as you can versus a winger. That's my opinion. But if it ends up being a winger, that's fine. But basically this one, I'm putting him in the middle, and I'm surrounding him with 2 Ontario Reign players. So AHL guys, legitimate AHL guys that fans would buy the Ontario Reign jersey of. And I'm putting, the one Kings prospect in the center, but it can be a left winger, it can be a right winger. But the whole point of this one is that guy is basically on the cusp of being in the NHL with the Kings already. So this is maybe not necessarily your best prospect, but again, the guy that's on the bubble between the NHL and the AHL. And you want to put him with these Ontario Reign staples because that solidifies that line as this is the talent of, the Kings prospect mixed with the Ontario Reign veterans. So, I know these guys aren't with the team anymore, but you could imagine that, maybe you've got Martin Ferk at left wing, TJ Tynan at right wing, and Francesco Pinelli at center. Something like that. Something where, that's just a primary example, but I'm just trying to give you context as to what I'm talking about. So you have a Martin Ferk and a TJ Tynan who are the guys that are going to sell the Ontario Reign jerseys. They're going to be Ontario Reign guys. And then you put them out there with a Pinelli or a Samuel Hellenius or something to that, so there's that. Okay. Now for the second forward line, so that's 3, it's all Kings prospects. And the reason why you do this is because you want to put together a line of prospects that you think all have the ability to one day make the NHL, and you want to put these guys in their best, most natural position on the ice. Even if this is a line that gets created maybe out of thin air, maybe there's not initial chemistry with these guys, but you still put them out there. So I don't know. Maybe it's Andre Lee with Samuel Hellenius and Martin Chromiak, something like that. Something where you think that those guys can end up playing in the NHL one day. You want to give them top 6 minutes. You want to give them top 6 responsibilities, but you also want to have this because let's say in the off case that there's another Dwight King, Jordan Nolan, Tanner Pearson, Tyler Toffoli type thing where there's a line that opens up in the NHL that needs 2 wingers to come up and play together. Well, now if you've got your prospects playing on the second line, you can call up Andre Lee and Martin Chromiak to come up and just plug in, so that's what I'm saying. And then I'm going to get to the third line in a minute here, but, the third line kind of feeds into that as well, which is the third line could do the same thing. So maybe this, third line where you have 2 prospects and 1 AHL guy, maybe those 2 prospects are the guys that get called up, or maybe they slide up to the second line now in the AHL. So that way it's still 3 across the board. So, that 3 is really the guys that you think can make the NHL someday, but they're maybe not ready just yet. But you're putting them in a position to get more playing time, to start establishing a rhythm and like a really strong cohesive element together. So that's the second forward line. The third line, I kind of was just alluding to it, but you've got 2 Kings prospects with 1 AHL player, and I would think that this AHL player is, again, another veteran guy. It's a TJ Tynan. It's a Martin Ferk. It's somebody like that. But maybe a guy that is there maybe for a couple seasons and then they move on. But it should be a center on that third line is what that guy should be, because you want to have some stability down the middle anyway. You can't just go, having all your centermen in the AHL be these young prospects. You got to win games too. And how you win games is winning faceoffs, putting good positioning down the middle. And so to have a third line guy be a stable AHL defense or a centerman that probably is maybe already in their prime or maybe just a little bit past their prime, a guy that knows, he's going to be an AHL guy, but he can lead a line for these young guys. And for the 2 Kings prospects, they should be wingers on the third line because, again, as I was saying, there could be a chance where a Dwight King, Jordan Nolan opportunity presents itself with the Kings, and for the Kings, they might just look down in Ontario and go, what's the best pair that we have? And they might go, okay, I've got Andre Lee and Atu Jamson playing together, so let's call them up. So something like that. So that's how I would build that. And then for the fourth forward line, it's 1 again, and I would go back to it being a centerman because, again, you want to try to have more centermen in your prospect pool than wingers because it's easier to move. This is what they say. It's easier to move a center to the wing rather than moving a wing to the center. So it could be, again, with the first line, it could be a winger. With the fourth line, it could be a winger again. It just depends on who you have in your system that you think is going to carry that. But I will say that for this criteria that I think the fourth line prospect, wherever they are, if they're a center, if they're a wing, whatever, the fourth line Kings prospect should have played an extended period in the NCAA, because, as you'll see, I have them flanked with two NCAA free agents. So those free agents that you're signing are not probably going to make it to the NHL. I hate to be blunt about it, but you want to make sure that you're signing guys that have decided to make playing professional hockey a career. If they've gone to college and maybe they've played 4 or 5 years in the NCAA, that's a guy that's already seasoned and conditioned, and you don't have to worry about him being 20 years old, whatever. So you would go get those guys, and preferably you'd maybe want to sign two guys that played together for the same collegiate team. Or if they didn't play together for the same collegiate team, maybe they were rivals and you just see something with those two guys that, they could play really well together. But for that fourth Kings prospect, I would also want to hope that he had NCAA experience. So the first name that comes to mind when I think of that fourth line center LA Kings prospect is Jack Hughes. So like Jack Hughes flanked with two NCAA wingers, something like that, okay? Now going to the defense where you've got 1-2-1. So now you kind of understand what I'm saying about these numbers where we're plugging in certain things. So the first line is one homegrown Kings prospect, drafted, etc., paired with one AHL veteran defenseman. So, it would maybe be Hickett's or something like that, where you want a guy that is a top draw in terms of selling the Ontario Reign jersey. So again, in the same way that we had TJ Tynan and Martin Ferk, that's what you want with this veteran AHL defenseman. And so for that reason, you want to pair him with the same idea applies for that first line forward Kings prospect, where this defenseman is on the cusp of making the NHL. They are on the bubble between the NHL and the AHL. So you want to put one of your top defensive prospects with a AHL established defenseman. So in this case, your prospect might be Jacob Dvorak. So he's a left shot defenseman. So I'll put that on the left, and then the open spot would be on the right for the AHL player, okay? Now, your second pairing is both Kings prospects. This is the idea here is that you want these two guys, again, playing meaningful minutes, and to do that on the second pair, that makes sense. And at the same time, that second pair probably lines up with the second forward group, so that whole 5-man line is all homegrown Kings prospects. And, we've seen that the Kings like to do this, especially over the years when you've had, even as an example for this year before Drew Doughty got injured, but you had Laferriere with Kopitar and Kempe backed by Anderson and Doughty. All 5 of those guys are homegrown, home drafted LA Kings players. So that is something that the Kings like to do. They like to keep all their homegrown guys on the top line, or kind of, they want to have that sort of chemistry. Even they did it last year when Quentin Byfield was playing with Kopitar, Kempe, Anderson, and Doughty. So the second forward line and the second defensive pair would all be LA Kings prospects. And the idea, again, for these two defensemen is that they need to get good playing time. It maybe should be two guys that have a little bit of higher experience, or they maybe are a little bit more stable. So maybe this line is Dvorak and Otto Celine or something like that. And maybe on the top line, it's an Angus Booth instead of a Jacob Dvorak, something like that. So again, you want to have AHL guys, and you also want to have a lot of Kings prospects, but you can't have your team losing games. And I think that having too many prospects on the top line or whatever can get dangerous, but having them as the second line is probably a little bit more fitting and prosperous in terms of getting those wins. And for the third defensive pairing, it's again a 1. So again, for defense, it was 1-2-1. And for this one, it is their prospect should be the opposite of whatever the top defensive one prospect was. So when I said it was Jacob Dvorak on the top line, or even if it was Angus Booth, those are both left shot defensemen. So your third pairing defenseman, that's a prospect, should be a right shot. You want to have an even balance between your prospects of two lefties, two righties. And so that's what you have here. And then you pair them kind of in the same way that I did with the fourth forward line. You want to do NCAA player with that group, and a guy like that would be Cole Krieger, something like that. Cole Krieger with right shot, up and coming Kings prospect defenseman. Okay. And then to wrap this all up, we go to the goaltenders, and that's two. And that would just be two homegrown LA Kings drafted prospects. The reason why I'm going that route is I know that the Kings like to go with bringing in veteran goaltenders, at least one of them to back up a prospect or something like that. But I really do believe that the best way that you can have a good goaltender at the NHL level is to give them as many games as you can in the AHL before you call them up. And to do that, to have that insurance policy, is to have two AHL guys playing those games, especially too if you look at it this way. When you bring in a veteran, you use it as a safety blanket, and you say, hey, there's going to be nights where games are difficult. Let's lean on the veteran. No, lean on a kid when things get tough, because when things get tough, that makes that kid have to grow up and mature a lot faster than sitting on the bench and letting, the veteran take care of it that night. Put those kids in uncomfortable games and uncomfortable positions. Make them have to work during those hard games. Don't give those games away to a veteran that knows how difficult they really are. That way, when the kid gets called up to go play in the NHL, he knows what it was like to battle. In this case, for these two goaltenders, unfortunately, Eric Portillo was not homegrown or home drafted by the LA Kings, but Jacob Ingham was. And it's, by the way, on a side note, I'm really happy to see Jacob Ingham go back to the Ontario Reign. I actually really like Jacob Ingham. Out of the last group of Kings prospects for their goaltenders that they had, I really thought Jacob Ingham was the best one that they had. So I am glad to see him come back. I don't think he's ever going to make it out of the AHL, unfortunately, at least not with the Kings organization, but I'm happy to see Jacob Ingham back. So maybe it's a Jacob Ingham and a Hampton Slakinski. I know he's not there yet because he's going to go play NCAA, but maybe it's a Slakinski and a Ingham, or maybe it's a Carter George and a Jacob Ingham, something like that. So again, you want to have your two homegrown, talented goaltenders playing meaningful games. And if you give them these challenging games, maybe you split the duty. Maybe over the 82 games, one guy plays 41, another guy's plays 41. That's an even split. So maybe if you do 60-40 in terms of percentages, or I don't know, 65-35, something like that. But you want to have those extra games that would normally go to the veteran not be going to the veteran. Give it to the other kid. Make them both play tough, meaningful games, okay? So again, going through this, for the forwards, it's 1-3-2-1. For the defense, it's 1-2-1. And for the goaltenders, it's 2. So again, this was just how I would put together a roster if I was an AHL general manager or the AHL coach. Either way, my name is Keith Freeze. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, go Kings, go.